Then I call that's
Oh,
yeah, so get it wrong. Yeah.
That's, I can't believe it's there.
All right, we're gonna get started with the meeting now.
You write it all day long, and then you go to the store and you wanna write a check or whatever, or write a bill, and it's like, what is today?
Yeah.
The my Sharona story. The most interesting.
Wow. Ryan's always got good following.
I know, he does, he knows how to drive
Hi,
out.
Ryan. I have a question for you.
Sure.
We're wondering if, we might come and talk to our board commission, maybe even the board. We kind of like told you last night.
All right.
in college.
A lot of people online, huh?
Yeah.
All the housing meetings I've been to, the state is just killing to get everybody in a house, you know, basically. And, Kenny suggested, I think it was he, said, maybe in time, give her an update, or, you know, reach out farther than what I know, obviously.
All right, can everyone see the presentation all right?
You know, all these different groups.
Yeah, okay.
Online audience, are you there? Can you hear me?
Yep, I can hear you, Ryan.
Yes, everything's good, Brian.
Somebody unmuted, but
I can't hear you though.
the owl control.
If it was an hour control.
I mean, so.
No, I just pulled up and I'm gonna get feedback on mine if I bring the volume up.
Yeah, we just come with that.
Yeah, it's coming from that, so we just gotta figure out how to get the owl to output to,
Right.
Technology's great.
yeah.
And it always fails you right at the, you know, when at the moment you don't want it to, right? It's just something goofy too. I feel like our owl at Nescanaba, we have to tell it, you know, when you open up the Zoom session, it says, how do you want the audio? How do you want the, you know, how do you want to receive that? And ideally, if your laptop is talking to the owl, then you say that you want the audio to come from the owl.
The logo this month.
Yeah, they're really smart.
Smarter than we are.
You don't want me touching it.
Broken that last name, just
Searching for a while. I love the big thick handle. You know,
Yeah.
and a lot of them you find are really super thin, delicate. It's survived for a little over a year.
All right, can you hear me? Online audience?
Yep, can hear you fine.
Great.
Yep, I can hear you.
All right. Well, we're gonna get started with the bi-monthly CEDS meeting, and we got a good agenda here today. We have Brent Forsberg and Stuart Williams. And they're gonna be presenting on the economics of place and housing as an economic driver. We also have some mission updates. And I got a few current grants and training opportunities. So we're gonna get started with the introductions, and we're gonna start with the online audience, we're gonna start with the in-person audience and then switch over to our online audience. So we'll start with you, Phil.
Go right to the first systems. Liam Getch with the Small Business Support Hub.
I'm Alex Skofsky with Accelerate here in Marquette County.
Ryan Stern with Michigan Building Trades.
Antonio Down, housing specialist with the Marquette County Land Bank Authority. I also work as project manager with the county.
Jessica Walter with QPAD. Emily Susie with QPAD.
Daddy LaJoy with QPAD.
Lynn Durant, supervisor Marquette Township.
Stuart Williams, Confluence Capital Group.
Brent Forsberg, TA Forsberg Incorporated.
And Ryan Susie, senior planner at QPAD. And so I'm switching to the online audience now, and Holly's phone I have.
Hi, everybody. It's Holly Peoples from UP Michigan Works.
Hi, Holly. And
Hi.
then the other Holly.
Good morning, Holly Toma from USDA Rural Development.
Good morning. Bill DeGroot.
Bill DeGroot, Chocolate Township Manager.
Thanks, Bill. Amy Berglund.
Good morning, Amy Berglund from Invest UP.
Thank you. Ashley Selnell.
Good morning, Ashley Selno from Community Action Alger Marquette.
Thanks, Ashley. Ed Legault.
Hi, good morning. It's Ed Legault from the Delta County Economic Development Alliance.
Brett.
Brett Botvile, City of Menominee, Manager.
Thanks. And Corey Barr. Corey Barr is the city manager from the city of Manistee. Dina Johnson.
Hi, Deanna Johnson, Marquette County Habitat for Humanity.
Thank you. Emily Leach.
Morning, everybody. Emily Leach here, Senior Planner with the County of Marquette.
Thanks, Emily. Christopher.
Hey everyone, Christopher Germain, CEO of the Lake Superior Community Partnership in Marquette.
Thanks. And Joe Teal.
Hey everyone, it's Joe Teal, Innovate Marquette Smart Zone and Outdoor Innovation Fund.
Thank you. Jordan.
Jordan Stankina, City of Iron Mountain City Manager.
Great, thanks. Julie Carla.
Good morning, Julie Carla, the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services.
Nice to see you, Julie. We're getting a little bit of feedback from you, though. Kathy Reynolds.
Good morning, Kathy Reynolds from Greater Munising Bay Partnership and Munising Downtown Development Authority.
Great, thanks. Kathleen Henry.
Hi, I'm Kathleen with the Superior Watershed Partnership.
Thank you. Lee Shuri.
Hey, good morning. Lee Shuri, Michigan representative from the U.S. Department of Commerce, Economic Development Administration.
Good morning, Lee. John Melcher.
Hi, John Melcher, Michigan State University Center for Community Economic Development and Regional Center for Economic Innovation.
Glad to have you. And Michelle LaJoy.
Good morning, Michelle LaJoy with Executive Director for CAM and a co-lead with QPAD for the Regional Housing Plan.
Thank you. President Hughes.
Good morning, Dr. Narita Hughes, President at Bay College.
Thank you. Trent Bellinger.
Hello, Trent Bellinger, Director of Career and Technical Education for the Delta Schoolcraft Intermediate School District.
Thank you. Next is Victoria George.
Victoria George with Schoolcraft Tourism and Commerce and EDC.
Hi, Victoria. Last, I see Vince Bevins.
Morning, Ryan. Vince Bevins with the Michigan Department of Transportation.
Good morning, Vince. Is there anybody that I missed? Right, seeing as there's none, we're gonna get moving with the agenda. And so I'm gonna stop my share here now so Brent can share. And he's got a presentation for us on the economics of place, and I'll let you introduce that.
Yeah, let's make sure we can get this thing up here really quick. All right, step one. Looks like it's up, but it's not recognizing Zoom as a second screen. All right. So just a couple notes, that'll be all right. Well, good morning, everybody. My name is Brett Forsberg. I'm a developer out of the Lansing area that focuses primarily on single family and multifamily housing. And really excited to be here to talk about some of the things that we're working on, but also as of about a month ago, I had all but dissertation in my PhD. So my focus in research is how do we build stronger, resilient economies in our communities, especially in Michigan. And this is one of the reasons why Marquette was a market that we looked at that had a lot of opportunity because of the connections that's here and what the Upper Peninsula has to offer and resources and workforce and facing even worse than downstate, the problems of workforce housing and the effects it's having on out-migration and the local economy. So we'll get into that a little bit more into the presentation. Today's focus is going to first start on the research side of a little bit. Over the last year, I've been working with University of Denver and a lot of different groups up here. Ryan has been a huge help in feeding me data as I've looked through the market and what's happening, especially with population and housing affordability in the region. So I'll cover that at first and then kind of look at from the development side some of the opportunities that we're looking at for how some of this could be structured to create stronger private-public partnerships and help develop workforce and keep people in the area. And I'll turn it over to Stuart. Stuart's our partner with Confluence Capital, is working with us and has done extensive work in how to finance and work through these over his career.
Thanks, Brent. Stuart Williams, again, Confluence Capital Group. And what our group does is we work with companies like TA Forsberg and local stakeholders and communities and bringing together the capital resources, primarily from the private side, to work in conjunction with public resources brought together for economic development resilience. We make direct investments into various levels of projects from ground up and then beyond for continuing support. We also work in fund development and organization so that there's essentially bringing in that outside capital to develop a then locally administered resource that can continue to galvanize and fund projects for the long term. So I started working with Brent a little while back and on various projects. And then as we were talking about the opportunities here in the Upper Peninsula, we got interested in coming in and seeing what we could do here to help galvanize the projects that he's got on the drawing board at least.
Thank you. So for today, feel free to ask questions while we're going through. We've got about 30 minutes of presentation. I'll try to speed that up a little bit since we got started a little late with technical difficulties. And but really, interaction is important too, and we love to hear what's going on and thoughts and reactions to it. So as we, there we go. Getting started, I just kind of want to frame what's important for this conversation. Is one thing that I remind my team all the time in working in research and on the business side of it is that it's not just about the real estate. I mean, we get so caught up in the policy and the direction and the financing that we always have to come back and remember that everything we're doing, and especially with housing, touches every part of people's lives. So when we're looking at this, it's reminding us that it's about creating this human experience. So as we're looking at all of this data, as we're looking at the different policies that could come in place, just keep at the forefront that at the end of the day, it's about how do we create that human experience for people in the communities and the places that we live. My research is based in systems process thinking. So how I've divided it is looking at scales. So looking at the different regions, looking at the neighborhoods, then understanding as we're linking these together, how do those values that create that experience build across all of the systems, right? We've got to align within the US economy. We've got to align within the Great Lakes economy. We've got to align within the UP, align within, if we're in Marquette, then align it within the neighborhoods that are actually implementing and the people that are working together to create opportunity. So everything that I do looks at it from that standpoint, and how do these interactions occur? And then we take a little bit different approach. Everybody understands the financial capital model. And traditionally, especially through the mid 20th century, labor was looked at as an expense in projects, right? And we saw that kind of play out through efficiency in the economy, globalization, and getting competitive edge in cost. So the model that we're looking at is understanding that we have to look at all forms of capital. So we have the natural capital, the resources that we use to build our society. We have the social capital, which also includes the human capital, and the human capital arguably being the most important piece because it's all about creating that experience that we talked about just a minute ago. The financial capital, right? How do we align the resources in the financial markets that have gone to a more globalized model to help rebuild the local economies and build that resiliency back into it? You guys are lucky with a very robust regional network of banks. A lot of areas that's decimated and gone. That relationship in especially the primary markets and even downstate to a point, there's a few left, but not what it was even 10, 15 years ago, as a lot of these banks have been bought up for their liquidity to help larger financial institutions be able to continue to grow. And then we have the build capital, and that's something that we use and what we interact with daily. So that's the important piece, and what we're looking at is how do we align that built capital within the human experience and using the other capitals responsibly and creating that experience. So when we look at that, one of the things that really has started changing in policy, and what I've been excited about, is the fact that housing is being understood as an economic driver in regions. Our version of Lake Superior Downstate is the Lansing Economic Area Partnership, and the CEO and I, for years, I joined about a decade ago and brought up, that, hey, we should really be looking at putting housing at the forefront of economic recruitment to the area, that it's a really important piece. And I got a lot of pats on the back saying, you stay in your lane in housing over here, and we're going to work on recruiting businesses and business retention. And it was 2 years ago, I remember Bob called me and says, hey, Brent, we've got a company that's looking to come to the area. They want a housing report, and to understand if they're bringing in jobs to the area, what does it look like for our employees? What do they have available? What's coming down the line? And I got one of the biggest smiles I've had on my face. I said, so Bob, you're telling me that housing's an economic driver for our community now? And he got a little chuckle out of it, but it is. And a lot of businesses that are coming in now, that's one of the first questions. It's not just about the incentives the state has to offer. It's about how am I going to get the workforce, because it's become a nationwide problem. And there's a lot of research on that. And if anybody wants some of these articles, I can get them sent to you. Ryan, if it's okay, if they email you, and I can send this out. But over the last 10 years, and especially in the last 5 years, housing affordability and the mobility constraints of regions are really hindering GDP growth across markets in every size in the United States. So the big markets, especially right now, are seeing the outmigration as their rents hit $455 a foot, and people are just sick of it and moving back to markets where it's a little bit more affordable, understanding that it's more a percentage of income now. It's not just that absolute dollar that they're making. So they want that experience. They're tired of living paycheck to paycheck as they're working through. And this outmigration is occurring across the country, especially the largest 2 tiers of markets. So your New York, San Francisco's, and then even now to the Chicago's, and Nashville's even starting to feel it to a point now. So getting into some of those secondary markets, which offers a really great opportunity for markets like the UP, for Michigan as a whole, really, because we have a great value proposition as a state. I mean, we're overall affordable, and we have diversity in jobs. We have great amenities and resources that people are understanding are important. And that is moving into research. It's also companies are picking up on that too, which is why Michigan's seeing such a uptick right now of companies looking at it. And we still have our problems, right? We're still facing the affordability, and especially a market like the UP where there isn't a depth to the housing, and then you have this growth, it feels those effects a little bit more. So in looking at this, the study that I did was looking at the outmigration from the Upper Peninsula, and in conversations I've had with the Trades Council and with Ryan and Lake Superior and other groups, is understanding that this is a problem, right? Especially the young workforce is heading out to other areas. And I tested specifically the expenditure of housing as a percentage of income, which we'll talk about the results in a couple minutes. But it's important that when we're looking at this, I'm coming at it from the standpoint that the strong U.S. middle class depends on the opportunity for people to be able to buy a home, to build that wealth. And that's one of the key drivers that we're looking at, is how do we create that resiliency? And then it's based in economic theory. So I just bring that up so if anybody's understanding, it's looking strictly at supply and demand and regional outputs, and then the exponents of the resources, exponents of the labor, and the overall supply or the overall output of an area. So, and that can go both to the experience side and purely to the economic side, but that's the formula model that I use. And again, if anybody has questions, I'm just going to breeze over that because I don't think there's enough coffee in the room or on Zoom for people to understand that. But this is one piece that is important, and I'm sorry if it's not able to be seen from the back, but I'll go through a couple of these, is understanding the attributes of growth and decline. So in looking at setting up this model, understanding regions that have seen long-term growth and regions that see more of the ebb and flows. A lot has been done to look at why does this occur? And the markets that were looked at for this particular study focused on kind of lower Canada and in the upper half of the Midwest and kind of across the US. So it's a pretty good study for understanding what's going on, especially here in the Marquette area. So attributes for success: cities that have the communities that have seen long-term growth generally have at least some sort of city system of population 40 to 150,000. There's depth in the skilled and educated labor force and workforce in the area. Has close proximity to other major markets, so you can get trade going back and forth between markets, and sees constant advancement in services and consulting, finance. There's an economic system that's built and a pipeline that's built up. And then institutional infrastructure, so universities and trade groups and things that are able to continue to build that pipeline. And then has a positive image. Amenities. We saw, especially in the late 90s to early 2000s, that as people were coming to the workforce, they were amenity driven. They were picking an area, knowing that jobs were available, moving there because they wanted to be in that area, then finding their job. So I mean, that's part of that experience that's happening. We're still seeing some of that, and Marquette's a great example of that with the economy and especially the recreational economy here. And then a good industrial mix. Having a diversified economy is important. But what really caught my attention was the preconditions for decline. So no urban area, or less than 3 urban areas over 40,000, or 1 urban area over 100,000, that kind of anchors an area. Not on major transport accesses or access and trade routes, which here we've got the waterways and things that are in, but understanding the proximity to other larger markets, it's kind of on the edge. But economies that are founded on resource exploitation or primary processing and weight losing industries that are mining industries, things that are extracting, are the economies that are the most vulnerable. And I'm sure that's not news to anybody up here. And understanding that is something to look at, and when understanding the opportunities and where to move forward, where some of the vulnerabilities are in long-term growth. And understanding the climatic and geographical conditions. And you guys have done a great job of getting closer to the 4 seasons, so creating that so there's availability of things and amenities to do even when there's a little bit extra snow and cold on the ground. And then understanding too the demographic factors that go into this, that there's a lot of externalities in technology progress, and understanding that keeping that as a key component as industries continue to evolve, and then understanding the transit, geography, climate, and industrial makeup and really the human workforce being one of the key components. And especially right now where we're at in our economy, those that attract the workforce are going to be the communities that win moving forward. And then understanding the demographics of areas too. So a study that was given to me was Peterson and Winkler. It was your guys' comprehensive study on outmigration in the UP, looking at the COVID model. And we had breakfast this morning with Ryan and Mike, and it was one of the first conversations was this outmigration that you guys see of your younger workforce continually. And that was where I started building this study on, was looking at, okay, what are the factors, and specifically, how related is it to the expenditure of the monthly percentage of housing? Because from 2016 to 2023, there was a exponential rise here in the cost of housing, like much of the nation, but really Marquette as a region really saw an uptick in that, higher than a lot of the other areas. And Northern Michigan as a whole, from the resort towns starting along the coast from Traverse City already had it, but getting up to the Petoskey's, the Boynes, and some of those smaller resort towns all felt it too, especially in their workforce housing and COVID, and seeing a lot of those houses being sold secondary, where people said, hey, I don't have to work in Chicago anymore. So it's easy to come right into Michigan, right? And saw a lot of West Coast too come this way. So what I looked at was it, as people migrated out of here, how related was it to the monthly expenditure on housing, and looking at it both from the rental and from the owner-occupied side. And the data sets that I had put together, so I looked at Michigan and the UP and focused specifically for the moving group was coming out of the UP. So with the way the data is available through the census, I had to use the entire Upper Peninsula for my study group. And then also looked at it from people moving within Michigan, where did they go, and in Wisconsin. So the three biggest out-migration areas were northern Wisconsin, down on the periphery in Wisconsin, on the Chicago markets, and then the outskirts of Detroit too. So moving into like the Novis and up into Gratiot County were kind of the three biggest areas that I saw in the census data. And then in looking at this, just gives you a map, a visual of the primary study area that was looked at. So taking from Green Bay and kind of coming up along the border of Michigan. So some of the things that I looked at the time variables year over year. I looked at the industry codes to see if out-migration was significant in any specific group. And we'll talk about the results in a minute. And then looked at the ownership status and then the housing expenditure as an overall percentage of income. The thing that surprised me, there were pockets that showed that areas, and there was significance in moving out of the area based on the overall percentage of income. But when you took the overall migration, it wasn't at the end of the day. So, and this was looking at, okay, if they're moving out of this area, it's not necessarily just driven by that cost of housing as a significant factor. And in the industries too, the only industries that it was significant in were service workers, retail workers, and those that had some of the more moderate income type jobs were the ones most likely, and there showed significance in that. And the rest, that out-migration was occurring for potentially other reasons, and we'll get into some of that in a minute. But what was shocking about that to me is we talk so much about the affordability piece and the fact that moving out and seeing the run-up, but with the run-ups that were happening in the other areas, in some cases, even though it wasn't significant, it was more expensive to move. Now, what was interesting in the moves is those that were buying houses were more likely to stay in Michigan when they were moving, and then moving to other areas. And we saw that as a piece that's worth looking at when we talk about home ownership, but also in trying to recruit people. Over 70% that were moving across state lines were renting. So having that rental stock and the availability is important too, to have that as a recruiting tool to come in. The other thing that I found really interesting was more the percentage of housing expenditure. So rental was sitting somewhere 28, 29%, but a lot of the people that were buying houses, it was between 17 and 22%. They were making the move. So where we're talking about this affordability at 30%, these moves are actually happening below that amount. People are making that decision to change their location. And it's not just above that 30% threshold. And I think that's important for us to understand when we're looking at this from a policy standpoint, is that 30% threshold, while it is the gold standard, people are making the decision to leave sometimes up to 10% below that. And whether or not it's the overall factor, that's still something to be looked at, but our idea of what that affordability level isn't what's showing in the market where people are making a change in their lifestyle.
Quick question.
Yeah.
Sorry if I missed this earlier. Is this across age ranges or is this a certain age range?
This was across age ranges. So these are just some of the quick numbers. So out of state, 21% were purchasing, 79% were renting. The 2022 expenditure on a purchased home was 17% and the rental was 28%. And in Michigan, people that were moving within Michigan are moving. Michigan moves specifically, no matter where they were going, were 55% renters, 45% buy as they were making moves. And looking at it again from the Wisconsin side, must have been a little bit higher because the overall, I think they were above 70% were renting when they were moving. So what do we do with some of this? And looking at Marquette as a whole, this is a dashboard that we use to look at markets to kind of begin to understand what are they trending in. And looking at the overall population, it's in the study that Ryan had given me that showed that there's a little bit of a downtick in population over the last few years. And census data, I'm sure it's probably the same information coming in, showing that we've seen kind of a little bit of a drop and a little bit of an ebb and flow, but it's holding pretty stable overall. And students at Northern was polling over the last few years, seems to be in that high 6, low 7 range. Absolute employment is ticking up a little bit from over the last 10 years, but if you take that on a trend line, it's pretty flat. And then what was interesting though was starting to look at the housing units. So 2016, there were 34,589 according to, this is using the ACS one-year data, by the way. And in 2022, which the last year was available, was 33,601. So you're seeing the unit count has kind of gone down for overall units. But what I don't have here that was in my notes is there was also a change in the amount of vacant units. So in 2016, there was over 8,000 vacant units in this market. And now I think it's down somewhere around 4,800, and I can get you that number. But when you take off the number of single family homes and add it, there's been about 1,800 units added to this market over that time period that were brought back online. So there's been a lot of rehab happening and housing coming back online as the economics have allowed that to happen. And then in the new construction side, this area polls generally 75 to 120 units has been the count over the last 8 years that are coming online, which hasn't been enough to cover the demand.
That is a quick question.
Yeah.
What would be the definition of vacant? Is that like homes that need intense renovation, or is that someone that's not using it, or
when someone's not using it. So when they did the census and went and did the household check, nobody was living there. Okay. And they also, if they can, they keep track of how many are actively for rent. And usually out of that number, it was under a couple hundred that were available. So there's not a lot of stock available at any given time in this market. And right now it's still a really overheated market. We'll look at that in just a second. But yeah, it's just strictly when they were doing the survey, looked in the windows and nobody's there. Yeah.
It includes seasonal, recreational, and occasional use, which is second homes and Airbnbs and hunting cabins and
Thank you.
And just to clarify, the total unit count on the 34,000 and change, that does include secondary homes and cabins?
Yeah, this is the entire stock in the area.
Got it.
Thank you for the clarification. So this is a tool that I use breaking the market into 20% segments just to kind of get an understanding. And I've got the data from 2016, and this is for the city of Marquette, and I'm still working on some of the other areas to look at to understand how are these price points moving through time in the area. And in looking at the city of Marquette, I brought this up. The first 20% of houses sell between 80 and 241,000 over the last trailing 12 months, and this data was pulled in June. Ben Argyle pulled it for me, and I appreciate it. I know he couldn't be here this morning, but he got me 10 years of data for the area to work on. And then what you start to see here is this compression in the middle, right, of the second and third quintiles, where you've got 242 to 300,000 and 300 to 370. So there's that's kind of where that depth of market is right now in this area, where people are where housing is has sold. So looking at that, that's kind of the price point that's the fastest market here. But what's interesting when we look at the interest rates, and what I did is I took 5% down and a 20% down and kind of hit it in the middle when I put this together and pulled the income distributions for the area. Right now, with the housing stock that has sold over the last year, 25.6% of Marquette County wouldn't qualify to be able to buy a house on the open market. And then 49% of the market is technically fighting for 20% of available housing stock. And then in the middle, you've got 20% of people that can afford the middle 40%. And then the top 40% is technically affordable for about 4.4%. Now, again, take that with a grain of salt, because there's a lot of other influencing factors that come into this. But really what we're looking here for is to understand that the disparity is there, and we can see it, and we've all felt it, and we all know that it's there, but the numbers are still tracking that in there. And then when you take the what's available right now, so there's under 3 months supply and probably closer to a 2 month supply of housing, which means that this market is still extremely tight, which then ties into why it's hard to recruit for businesses and why there's so many open jobs in the market and why it's hard for businesses to grow. So in looking at how we build the system stability is understanding what are the long-term outcomes that we're looking at. So in some of the things that we're working on is understanding how do we shift the understanding to managing this relationship that we're building. And everybody in this room and everybody on this call is a piece of that, right? The UP has done a great job, and I think is one of the best models in Michigan of understanding how to build that cross-network integration. And that's something that needs to be built on further to understand how to keep people moving to the area, keep the people that are here, and overcome some of these issues in housing. And understanding how do we realign some of our resources. So when we look at our models, when we're looking at our region, how can we tie back into the Great Lakes Basin? It's the third largest economy in the world. If you get a chance to look at the Great Lakes Council's report on that, it's interesting, right? All of our resources that are here. And how does that scale locally to use those resources to build housing and put money back in local businesses and the job recruiting that comes into it? And then aligning within the housing plan. So I put the link in here for your guys' regional housing plan and B, to understand your main goals are enhancing the efficiency and effectiveness of the housing ecosystem, increasing the supply of the full spectrum of housing, increasing the rehabilitation stock, which it looks like through the just the census data that's been pretty successful in taking some of that vacant stock and putting it back into full-time housing. And then reduce the underserved and vulnerable issues. So some of the models that we're looking at right now and is forgot the group's name. It's Northwest Arkansas. I forgot to put it on here. It's in my notes, but I'll get the link out. They've built an investment fund. They're facing a lot of the same problems that Michigan's facing. And being a market similar to the Upper Peninsula, where they're kind of on their own with their resources and availability, they worked with the businesses and built an impact investment fund that is helping offset some of the costs. They had both foundation donations, but businesses coming in understand that, okay, I might make a little bit less on this investment, but what I'm making up on the backside of this from having the employees and the production going up is more than worth it to offset the cost to get housing into that price point. So they've done one test building, they're doing a few others. So that's something worth exploring and seeing if that's an opportunity to continue to build those public-private partnerships. And then looking at the idea of community investment trusts, we're trying to get one out of the ground in Lansing that would allow people that live in the community to invest back in the property once it's stabilized and up and running, to work with investors that can come in and get it off the ground, but then have a mechanism for people to have some local ownership. So advantage for small businesses, if it's a commercial building, that they can have ownership in the building. In residence and multifamily, there's the opportunity for some equity to build while living in apartments because you're part of the investment piece that of it as you're living there. And then other potential ideas is looking at the land trust models. I know the land banks looked at some of those in the past, and we're looking at it downstate to say, okay, if there's a way to put the land in, get the infrastructure in place, allow for the multifamily and housing to go on it, that doesn't have to capitalize that in. They can keep the cost down a little bit, and agreements can be made that would make long-term benefits for areas to, in effect, subsidize using the land and using businesses being able to come in and help put that in place to create that long-term structure of keeping the cost down versus having to have it on the full free market. So as we're looking through these ideas, and these are things that can be explored, we're looking at them downstate. Another one that we're putting together on workforce development is working with our land bank and the emerging developer program down there and workforce development and creating an infill site with a couple of the trade unions to have people that are in the neighborhood that are underemployed come in, receive training, and then be able to look at career opportunities in construction. And you know, you guys have a very robust CTE program. We talked a little bit about breakfast this morning. That there's a real opportunity with that. Yeah.
Question, can you go back to the slide with Northwest Arkansas Investment Fund?
Yeah.
Have you gotten any figures as to what the cost per square foot is for it to go vertical with infrastructure? Or have you got any prices or anything like that?
We're just beginning that up here. So we've got our cost downstate on that.
Yep, and I would, second part of that question is I'd be curious how it would translate to the peninsula's economy. If I'm seeing that a lot of places are costing a lot more than we would think.
Yeah.
And then finding ways to taper that down and tighten that up.
Yeah, and Stuart can talk a little bit more about this, but really when we're looking at it, investors have an amount that they need to make, and then with the cost of money right now. So I'm gonna turn it over to you to.
And there's various other incentives that can be incorporated into the investment objectives for the impact fund to essentially bridge any kind of gap in the required returns for those investors, especially you look at some of the investment policies now that are being incorporated into foundations that are administering capital, pensions that are administering capital, where they have to have not just the financial return, but really economic impact beyond financial, so the triple bottom line thesis. And so what you typically do is look at the various needs of the community, the target community for the impact fund, and what needs to be taken into account, where those incentives can be aligned, and then that gets presented to the investors and bridges the gap with the return. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. I guess the other thought is, we're definitely, as a land bank, we're trying to do our part, but, single family homes, you spend a lot of energy and time trying to create them. And the cost per square foot right now to do that, even with the land acquisition costs already factored in, is pretty high, in my opinion. So, this seems like I'm more curious about those figures to see if we can replicate that model up here, but then looking at the numbers to see what that looks like, obviously, so.
Yeah, I think that's a dialogue with the stakeholders in the community to see what really the targets for the impact fund should be.
Yep.
To bridge that gap and then design something that's catered to the local community. And typically with the community impact funds, the investment committee is made up of the stakeholders when it's most successful.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Well, Brent, I got a quick question.
Yeah.
So you said the three areas that you saw outgoing migration that everybody was leaving to was Chicago, Green Bay, and then suburbs of Detroit. I mean, I can only presume that the wages are higher in those three areas than they are in the Marquette area. And when you're looking at, the 30% or below of, monthly income going for a house, is that gonna be doable with the monthly income, salary income of the Marquette resident? Because, I'm just guessing, that the people that are moving to Chicago, Detroit, or even in Green Bay are making more monthly than they are gonna be making if they stay here.
And they're spending more on their house while they're there too, because this was done as a function of just percentage, not the actual dollar amount.
Okay.
Transportation is one of the key components of that, and the cost of transportation wasn't figured into this as we looked at the market, because I assumed with the Green Bay, which is the first one that I looked at, that transportation options are going to be similar to what's here. When you get down into those other markets, there's public transportation available that allows people to spend a little bit more. And the trick is going to be figuring out, what does it take to get them to, what's the value proposition? I mean, is it the amenities that are here, the natural resources, and the events and things that people have? And that's what needs to be looked at and really understood with these young kids that are coming out of the school or looking at the 20-somethings coming here. What is it that's attracting you to an area, and how can we tell the story of Michigan and our different regions of what's available in those? I mean, the people that are coming here are going to have very active lifestyles for the most part, right? Because there's just so much to do outdoors that's available. But also with the amount of festivals and things that are going on, and the school districts and things, and putting those pieces together and packaging that story and recruiting people into the area. Really, at the end of this, the quick conclusion is the depth of housing market is a major impediment up here, and it's across Michigan as a whole, but really up here, there's just not the available stock when people are looking to come in, whether both the rental and the housing, that there's enough in any price point for anybody to it's just hard to come into the market. Where a little bit bigger markets, there's just enough in there where while it's still hard, it's not quite as hard as what's being seen up here.
Is that, when you're talking stock, I mean, there's, I would imagine there's different, I'm not sure how to say it, like different types of stock too, right? So there's the people who are trying to buy a home for the first time or come into the market that way. But there's also the people who have, maybe owned a house for a while and now want to move into a different house because they've had a couple of kids or want to live in a different area, that kind of stuff. And then that when they move, now that creates another opening, right?
Absolutely.
So is there, like, what do those kind of dynamics look like?
So that's known as moving chains. And I had a section in here, but didn't have enough time to cover it. But that's a very important piece, right? Especially when you look at the aging population in the UP. And both in migration of aging population, but also caught in the housing where they're at, where there's a lot of that housing stock that would be great for families, but you don't have that diversity of product mix in the social centers where people are, where they want to move. If somebody's living close to their friend network, their faith-based network, their hobby network, and they don't want to leave that to move sometimes even from, and we had meetings out in Negaunee about a month ago just to get some feedback from people out there of what are they seeing in that housing market. We heard that from a few empty nesters. I would be out of my 2-story in a second, but I'm not leaving this part of town. Like, I'll move a half mile over here to the other side of town, but I'm not leaving my network here. So how do we fix that? And that is a conversation that's part of that overall product diversity that needs to happen.
Are there any questions from the online audience for Brent? All right, any more questions here?
Yeah, Brent, what's your take on the short-term rentals? How our township board and planning commissioner thinking about limiting? We've got 30 or 40, I think, in the township right now. And I know the city's got a limit on theirs. How does that fit in? Because that's a lot of the market. That's a lot of the stock that's being taken up. In a lot of cases, even years ago, probably still, northern parents were buying up houses and, filling them with 4 or 5 kids or whatever to help pay the mortgage, and then keeping the house 4 or 5 years and then selling it. So that's almost like a short-term rental too, because it's off the market for a while. So how does that play in?
They're a double-edged sword for communities, because when they're active, that's money coming into the community, especially on the tourism side. But at the same time, COVID put it on an exponential curve where it ate up a lot of housing stock in markets. And then where communities started feeling that pain point is, with their teachers, their service workers and things. Shelby Township was one that really felt the brunt of it, or Shelby, not Township, Shelby Township in Oceana County, not the one down near Detroit, where the housing stock went up in price. A lot of the teachers and service workers in the area went to Muskegon and said, well, this is only a 35-minute commute. This isn't bad. And then get a couple late fall, early winter ice storms, and we're not doing that too many times. And then, so that whole base of workers were gone. And this is where just having that stock coming in is important to continue. Putting some restrictions in, especially in the short term, might not be an entirely bad idea. It's hard because the other side of me says, with property rights, it's tough, and understanding that there has to be this regulation, make sure they're safe and that, but looking at those overall restrictions. But it's a problem right now in what the housing stock is. And the long-term answer is finding ways to meet that demand, and how do we build this economics out to be able to get more stock on the ground? Because there's people that will build it. Might take a little bit of time to wrap it up. The money's available if the economics are right. And as long as we can align it with the incomes, we can get that market restarted. But it's tough, and especially here, even getting a hotel room up here, I booked a little late, not realizing that Harborfest was going on, and it was getting pretty scarce on what was available in this area. Yeah.
When you go into some new builds concepts like the one you showed earlier, you take a look at our target market analysis showing the Gandhi City, for example. Preferred target market home value for sale was between 250 to 300,000. That's kind of the sweet spot.
Yeah.
Building to that point and then finding the AMI that makes sense for it. When you do a build, is it generally the same area median income in that building? Are you doing a mix? Like, how does that translate?
So whatever we pick for our median price point, we try to stay within about a 25% range, just to kind of broaden that market up. And that's kind of a very loose analysis of what we look at. So especially on the smaller project, I mean, if we're looking at a bigger mixed use project, we're going to try to have multiple price points, and then also multiple styles, so that way to hit that broader demographic, so that way it can fill faster. So, really it just depends on the size of the project. If it's something 50 units or under, we're going to keep it a little bit more right around that 25% variance on the price. And a lot of that comes down to the banks. That's what they want to see, right? They want to see things that are pretty easy for them to look at, check their boxes and say yes. Yeah, and for the de-risking.
Yeah, I think Brian made a great point earlier, which got me thinking about that, was if people aren't making as much money as downstate or other big cities, then they won't have as much to spend on a mortgage, right? Then that price point has to translate to maybe not
the median incomes and income distribution are pretty strong up here for Michigan. So, I mean, there's definitely, you got a lot of service workers and things too, but so a lot of the other areas that have college towns and things, and some of that's skewed, and that's one of the things that I've got to work through on the data is the percentage of college students here that are figured in. is a little bit higher as an overall percentage. So that's going to skew some of this too.
I've noticed, and I'm not, everybody at the table and Christopher Jermaine at the LSP would know a lot more about this, but we work with small businesses and startups primarily. So we look at the market.org, they have a dashboard where it shows the occupational data demographics. And so this year when I was looking at, I don't know if the numbers are just updated earlier this year, but the wages that it shows on there, I don't think reflect what's going on here. And I don't know if it's remote workers or how that data is captured, but just the amount of jobs that were like 100,000 and above, I just don't see those around here, that the number of them that are listed. So I don't know if that's.
It might be how they're gathering their samples. You know, it depends how they're conducting the surveys. So I look for the data source. If you can get that, that might give you some insight to how that's getting skewed, maybe beyond what's actually perceived.
Yeah, I don't know if it's
sometimes they'll loop in people that are working remotely. They're not necessarily in the region the entire time when they're earning that money. They're not actually here physically.
Yeah.
But a lot of it depends on how they're gathering the data and the sample size, and they should be providing the source for that data. So that'd be a good place to look at.
Okay.
Yeah, Alex, Mary does that data booklet, so she would be able to tell you exactly where she gets it, but most of it comes from, I believe, software like Implant and other things that we pay for to get access to more proprietary data.
Okay, excellent.
Yep.
Point of curiosity when I look at it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think there's a local perception that people are coming in from the area and buying up our houses, you know, and they can afford them. And so they're kind of squeezing us out of the market. So, and raising our property values. Because, yeah, like Alex said, I don't see it. Maybe it's just what I make, my staff or whatever, but I just don't see that people are making, I mean, what would be the monthly hit on a $250,000 home? That's a lot. I mean, when you're starting a family and then you've got student loans and, and auto, cars, I mean, I don't know how they do it. I bought my house for $79,000 back in 2000. And I struggled with that mortgage payment forever.
Well, I think of the demographic data that Brett was showing, it shows that there is the population moving in from the coast and some of those other areas that is happening.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah, some communities feel really, really threatened by that, and I feel like they should, but I don't know how you would even, I don't even want to say regulate for that, but allow for that. I don't know. It's so market driven.
The problem that we've had, since 2018, we've had a double in cost on per foot on units that we build. You take coming out of COVID, I've still got 3 buildings that are running on temporary power because we don't have the parts downstate to finish off the electricity. So they're not even at full capacity because we had to burn units to put in temporary power systems till our final switch gears get here. We've been waiting, I think we've just crossed 70 months at this point. So it's just become a bad joke. But so you've got all of these things that have happened, and then you add in the fact that mortgage rates, and that's been a huge one, right? I mean, coming out of COVID, rates were still low enough where people were able to afford, those prices were there. But the cost of money was so cheap, it almost didn't matter at that point. Where now all of these things have come together at the same time. And right now there's been 53 permits pulled in the county for the year. So I don't know if it's going to make even the 90 some this year of total permits. So, and this is being experienced across the country where we're in this perfect storm where the economy hasn't had a chance to adjust itself to allow for that affordability piece to hit. And this is far worse than any one as a percentage that's happened. So mid-90s, when we had the little bit of the downturn, new houses being built, over 75% of the housing stock was affordable to the median income of an area. We're under 24% right now, and I bet this year that number is going to be lower. So when we're looking at what's able to come online, it's the cost is prohibitive. It's probably the market to figure it out is going to be 3, 4, or 5 years before it can adjust back into it again and kind of stabilize out and get in a normalized market. So in the crunch that we're in, it's finding some of these other opportunities to be creative in how they work on it and looking at that, okay, especially with these businesses GDPs that, you know, look, we know this is an issue. How can we work together? And I forgot the name of the production facility, Peterson Farms. They built workforce housing. They took some of their property on an old orchard, built it, worked with the community, got other businesses in, and worked with builders and put together a housing plan. And then the owner of the property basically became the land trust themselves. And then what they did is put in a restriction that this new housing, you had to work within 40 miles to have access to the housing, because that's not a fair housing issue at all. That okay, you can restrict for primary housing, especially with dollars coming in, to say, okay, that only the workforce. So but it wasn't just for their workers. They made it for the teachers, for safety and everybody else. That if you work within 40 miles, you had access to this housing.
That's awesome.
Yeah, and those are things versus you're going back to restrictive policies, because the growth is good to a point too, right? I mean, you've got money coming in, you've got new businesses coming in that are interested, and that's that technology that allows the economy to continue to grow. So, you know, really right now it's finding how do we get through the next 36 to 48 months and get that housing back in, get it balanced.
Yeah, one more. We don't have to talk about it, but I was wondering if I'm on the executive committee of our community foundation for the county. And so years ago, pre-COVID, we had met with Northern Initiatives, who's an alternative lender in the area. And it wasn't about housing, but we were looking at what kind of partnership we could potentially do in taking some of our funds and lending them out. And so when you had mentioned foundations, partnership stewards, I wonder if you guys would be able to send us maybe some examples of foundations and communities.
Of course, and a lot of the community impact funds, like I said, they take in the needs of the community that it's trying to assist and help enhance the economic development. So it's not, the housing is an important factor here, and the availability and the depth of supply. But there are other factors, small, medium-sized business, existing businesses that need alternative lending for growth. And so a lot of times in the allocation within those impact funds, there's a portion that's for small, medium-sized businesses, even startups. And that's usually designed around other incentives and various matching programs at the state and federal level for economic development, where they will match or help back some of the funds that go in. So yeah, happy to send you some of those examples.
Awesome, thank you.
I'll give you my card before we leave here.
We're a few minutes over now.
That's all right. I love the dialogue here.
Yeah.
So, are there any last questions? Well, if not, thank you very much, Brenton Stewart, for joining us, and you've really given us a lot to consider here.
I hope it was useful. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Just get my screen share on. All right, so we have some updates from Mishta on the My Neighborhood reservations. So we've spent down about $2 million out of our $2.28 million regional target. And those are a mix of housing and community development fund dollars and CDBG dollars. The homes, the projects that were reserved, not awarded yet, but reserved, were all across the region. We had one in Delta, one in Dickinson, 2 in Marquette and 1 in Menominee. And it was a mix of rehabilitation and new units. It looks like 37 units were assisted, and then 4 rehabilitation units. So thinking about this, does anybody have any questions on it, on the regional target allocations or the projects that were awarded? I don't really have much information on the projects, but
I just want to say, I think it's great that it's across the region. I always feel like there's so much energy around Marquette County. I love Marquette County, don't get me wrong, I live here and I will not move ever. But I feel like the rest of our region, or the rest of our counties that make up our central region, don't always get the same opportunity. And so it's really exciting to see that this is spread out throughout the region. Very happy about that.
Yep. So Mishka has put together a draft regional investment strategy, how they figure out our regional target allocations. At our meeting last week with Amy Hovey and the Mishka leaders, she said that the 2025 target allocation is going to be about $3 million. So about $1 million more than we had to play with in the last round. So that's good news, but I think it's going to be a lot more competitive this year. So I keep telling everyone that they need to get their applications in as early as possible. It's on a first come, first served basis. And so that's going to be important, but this is how they figured out our target allocation. And then I threw up our action plan here. This was updated last in December, but I'm wondering, is there anything, did it meet our needs, or did it fall short? Also, there's a piece of legislation that's out there, SB 293, which would amend the Housing and Community Development Fund to make it more flexible and give us the ability to do other uses like TMAs and studies and training and rental assistance and whatnot. That wasn't possible this round. So I'm looking for your thoughts on, do we need to tweak our action plan at all to make it more suited to what we want to use it for? And I have a code here. This takes you to Mentimeter, and there's a quick 2-question survey. The online audience can take a picture of this or go to menti.com and type in the code here, and you can vote on whether or not we need to update the plan, and just as a quick feedback section on what aspects of that you would like to change. So I'll give you a minute, but if anybody has any thoughts here in the audience, then I'd be willing to hear them.
Just a quick thought as we were going through the My Neighborhood application. I mean, some of the data that they ask about are more current studies. So I would just ask other counties in the area, if they have not had a housing study assessment done or target market analysis, can we all talk about that to find out where they need help? There was the rural readiness grant that was $50,000. I asked around a little bit. I hadn't heard many people applying for it. It was for the non-RRC neighborhoods or communities. My first thought is, can we just get that kind of going across the region to make sure that, Marquette County has one? But I do worry about other counties that may not have it. If they're gonna look at development projects, I mean, that's probably one of the first things that they should have ready to go.
I know rural readiness or not rural. Housing readiness.
Sorry.
Didn't apply to counties. They weren't eligible entities under that, and that would be a really great change if they could make them eligible and allow for TMAs to be done in other counties.
Is there still just one entity that's doing the target market analysis? No,
There's multiple.
Okay.
Yep.
I just wonder what the pressure is on that organization, because I feel like a lot of people want their TMAs.
Yeah.
So, and what is the cost for a bi-county TMA? Do we know?
I don't know, I can't speak for that too much, just besides what maybe Marquette County paid. I believe it was, Chris is on the call, I think it was $84,000 from Marquette County.
Okay.
And that was funded through grant, land bank, and then I think 8 local units chipped in between $1,000 and $5,000 each.
Okay, sounds achievable as far as TMAs go, for sure. Yeah.
One other thought, I guess, just so I can go, is with the total units that are being produced or are gonna be coming online with the $2.2 million from this first round, it's about 39 or so, 56 a pop. So I think, like, for me, as I start thinking about other projects that we could include in the next round, I think we have to look at maybe doing something at scale. Ground up construction is very expensive. We're looking at that cost with the land bank, and that money goes toward a brand new unit, but there also are ways to do it with rental rehab, office space conversions to apartments, things where that developer may not need $100,000 per unit, and maybe looking at a $56,000 subsidy or investment from those folks to be able to hit those target markets. So I guess what I'm saying is, if we could start thinking about that regionally and how we can produce more units with this funding that's coming online versus doing one project and doing it at like 1.5 million, and there goes the money. So I just want to see more of that thinking as I get together with folks to see if there are opportunities out there that we may not know about that would get those units online faster.
Good thoughts. All right, does anybody else have any other thoughts?
Okay, I just have one thought about single family homes. So, we had talked about how people don't want to leave their community. So those empty nesters, they don't want to leave their community, and so it really prevents them from, or resisting having to be relocated just based on, aging and their lack of ability to keep up with the lawn and even put the garbage out and those kinds of things. So I'm just wondering if there's a model somewhere where, like, people don't have to leave their communities. Everybody thinks like senior housing needs to be like this big mega development kind of thing. And so I'm just wondering if there isn't an opportunity to have it more at the neighborhood scale. Does that make sense, or does that not financially float?
In the feedback we got when we were there a few weeks ago, a few of the folks that came up were looking to rent, and we're done with home ownership. So, again, it's just about getting that more diversity of product on the ground. You look at the amount of two-story stock in this area, there's a lot of it. And so getting products that are ranch or easier entry type products that have first floor living, that's one of the things that we identified as one of the most important of whatever we are able to do here to bring online quickly. So that way, it allows for that to start to happen. And as far as the senior, I think it's more design than it is at anything. I mean, you can still find people if you have a lawn to hire lawn work done and things if it's not there.
Right.
And but I know there's a need for 55 plus communities.
Yeah, senior living, not necessarily assisted living.
Yeah.
Right.
And you'll have some, senior living communities they're designed and built out of their single family residences. And then they'll have a co-op organization that takes care of all the lawn care and all of that. And so that it's kind of a master planning, on the community itself, but it's not I think what you're talking about or referring to is the assisted living facilities that are all more and more enclosed because there is that need for day-to-day assistance on basic tasks. But the senior living communities, and you see those come up where it's 55 and older, and they'll have a co-op of some kind for those regional services.
Okay.
Yeah.
Any unit of any type right now is going to help because everyone that comes online allows for just a little bit more ease on the pressure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I know there was kind of a popular thought like, well, as people, age out of their single family home, that single family home will go on the market. But when I talk to people, or introduce that thought, they're like, I'm dying, they're gonna have to turn me out of here in a gurney. Yeah, there is no way I'm giving up my home. So, and as you mentioned, there was tied to community services and where their friends and family are located. And so we have a lot of townships that are very, very rural in our region and just a few hundred people. And, when you look at the aging demographic there, it's stunning. There's like, 4 children and, 200, people living that are age 55 and older kind of thing, so it's like, how do you, and yet they don't want to leave their community, so we either think about rehabilitating their homes so that they can stay in their homes as long as possible. Or maybe it's some type of housing system that can help support their transition from single family to senior housing, and then, of course, if they require more services, then they would have to go to some place where that's, they offer those services. Just a thought.
One of the things that we're looking at, we haven't fully implemented, it's called universal design. So, and that could be that transition because it allows for more flexibility that floor plan.
Right. Okay.
Yeah. And, as far as community goes too, and looking at it, when you have smaller areas with high aging population, well, what does that mean 5, 10, 15, 20 years from now? That's something when we're looking at the housing, and it's a tough conversation, right? Because people, even if they're not entirely happy, people like things because we feel comfortable when there's not change, right? And the entire state, the entire country is going through all sorts of changes right now. We were seeing in every aspect, right? The economy, the weather, the types of jobs, and it's scary. And the conversations are tough, but it really needs to look at if we want our communities to survive, let alone thrive 5, 10, 15 years from now. The only way to do it is to get people to move, and that change has to happen. And it is a tough conversation, but something needs to be looked at and then, planned out over time too, to understand, okay, we have this aging population. Maybe if the house were a block and a half down, they would move if it was the right floor plans, it was an easier living.
Right.
My parents are one of those, they will not move because their kids were raised there, and my mom refuses to leave that 2-story. And, but on the flip side, my dad fell down the stairs a year and a half ago and ended up 2 days in the hospital because he walked down in the dark, didn't turn the light on, and those are the things that they're looking at too, right? So it's, that dynamic's tough.
Right.
And to your point too, if the only option is like, well, I can stay in the house that I'm in, or to go to like a senior living center, no, I want to stay where I'm comfortable in the house. But if there is that kind of like more like gradual step, it makes it a bit more easier step.
I think so too, and then it does free up those homes for families, again, and especially in those, now that we're getting broadband, we are getting, I do believe there's a lot of folks that want to live here or want to come back to the area. But, and now that, it's more acceptable for people to work from home, but they do need access to broadband to be able to do their jobs. You know, I think they would move to these more rural communities, if housing is available, but they probably can't afford to build a new house in that community, so.
Well, this link will remain active for 2 weeks, so if anybody wants to vote on whether or not we update our action plan, I would appreciate it. So far, we have 7 responses, and so I'll send out the presentation after this meeting, and you'll be able to click it or visit it from there. And lastly, I have a few opportunities, grant opportunities, training opportunities and events. So I'll highlight the EDA Economic Adjustment Assistance Grant. There's no deadline for that. And that's an economic development grant for public projects and things that can increase the amount of jobs. Next, we have Safe Streets and Roads for All. That's nearing the deadline right now. The planning and demonstration grants are due on August 29th. And EPA's community change grants are due on November 21st, and there's some matching state funds available for that. For training opportunities, MSU Extension is hosting Governing Essentials series on things like the Open Meetings Act and rules of order and things like that. Those are being hosted in December. CEDS Real Estate Boot Camp is coming up in Grand Rapids on September 16th through 20th. And MDOT or Safe Routes to School is doing a regional training September 18th in Escanaba. And then finally, Marquette County Citizen Planner, another offering through MSU Extension, is going to be offered October 2nd through November 13th in Negaunee Township. And we're really excited that that's being offered locally. It doesn't come here too often. And then we got a few events. The 3rd annual Upper Peninsula Cybersecurity Symposium is September 30th through October 2nd at NMU, and it's offered free because of the Marshall Plan. And Building Bridges for BEAD, a community and ISP network expo, is being offered at the Crystal Mountain Resort downstate on October 15th. And I want to give you all an opportunity, if you have any projects or anything that you'd like to share that's relevant to regional development, go ahead and speak up.
Hey, Ryan, this is Kathy Reynolds. I just want to make note that on October the 15th, UPEDA, in collaboration with UPCDC, is going to be having an event on October the 15th in Ishpeming at the Mather Inn. And we're going to be covering topics such as housing, community development, city manager updates on their infrastructure things and projects they got going on downtown, DDAs, and then also UPCDC. I don't know if Amy is still on. She wants any update on her end on that meeting also. But if you go to upeda.org and you want to register for it, the registration link is on there.
Thank you for that, and I'll add it to my list before I send out the presentation.
Thanks, Ryan.
Any others? All right, well, if that's it, then I think we can call the meeting a wrap, and I appreciate everyone's participation and looking forward to the next one. It's on October 24th from 10 to 11:30, and it's we're only doing it virtual this time, so So I won't see you, but I'll see you. All right, that's a wrap.
Thanks, Ryan.
Thanks.
All right.
Thanks.
There's plenty of food here. Oh, that's okay.
Oh. I remind myself, it's not knowing.
But it is. I was thinking through that, in the, when I wanted, I just have to assessment, how the workforce housing is kind of lower on the most of what people were.
Yeah.
It's interesting seeing like the data in aggregate, the experience in specific ways.
Yeah.
Oh, they should
Yeah.
have.
It's like, yeah, where's the? I'll realize the anecdotal data.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's like.
Oh, yeah.
Ryan, can you end the meeting so we're not being recorded?
Oh.
Some of you are busy.
Yeah, I'm gonna see if I can.